Hi everyone, welcome to another video. Today I'm going to share with you this fun card that has a great watercolor background, and it was super easy to do. But first I want to remind you to follow me across social media if you haven't already. Those links are going to be down in the description box below. While you're down there, you can also subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and if you enjoyed this video, a thumbs up always helps so much. I'm using this stamp set from Clair Stamps. It's from their Color by Face series, and it's called Blossom. I'm using 4 of the little cactuses to stamp out my background. I will be heat embossing these, so I like to stamp when I'm doing black heat embossing. I like to stamp in black pigment ink to get the richest black color. I find sometimes that even with the darkest of dark black embossing powder, which I will be using here, it still just isn't black enough for what I want. So I like to go ahead and come in with the black ink first. You could also use VersaFine Onyx black ink. Any type of black pigment ink is going to work here. So I pre-treated my cardstock, and I'm working on watercolor paper that is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So A2 size. And I'm just going to continue to stamp out these little cactuses and cover this background. I like to work in sections when I'm doing heat embossing, so I'll stamp a few, then go ahead and cover them with heat or cover them with embossing powder, and then go ahead and heat set. I find that that cuts down on the warping that I get. Before I get too far into this, I do want to say that all the supplies I'm using today, they're all going to be listed down in the description box. So if I forget to name a color of an ink or whatever it is that I'm doing, all that information is down in the description box, so you can head down there if you have any questions. Once I get about half the panel stamped, I'm going to go ahead and put on some black embossing powder. Black embossing powder is super messy. A lot of people don't like to deal with it. I don't mind it every now and then. It's not something I use on a regular basis, but it is good to have in your craft supply. And even with my limited storage space, I do like to keep this on hand. Anywhere that you might get some stray powders, which it's inevitable with black embossing powder, just use a dry paintbrush. You can go as small or as fine detailed as you want, just to flick away those extra little powders. Once I had it all cleaned up, I did go ahead and heat set it, and then I can come back in and stamp the rest of the panel. Again, using that same VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink to do my stamping. Now, before I came back in and started stamping again, I did go ahead and pre-treat my surface with my anti-static tool again. So you want to come in and you want to do it a second time before you start stamping again, just because whenever you heat emboss, you're touching it and all that great stuff, but it can knock away a lot of the embossing or the anti-static powder that's on there. So just go ahead and do it again before you start stamping. I'm going to finish up very, very quickly here. I just have a few more little stamps that I want to stamp in there to fill in all that little extra space. Once I have it good and covered and I'm happy with the stamping, I can go ahead and come in and apply some more black embossing powder. I like to do it over a coffee filter. That just helps me keep a cleaner surface. If any does happen to get spilled out, use one of those sticky rollers like you use for lint and pet hair. That picks up the embossing powder right off your surface, holds onto it so it's not going to flake off or fall off, and then you can just toss that in garbage. To do my watercoloring today, I am switching it up. I am using some Catherine Pooler inks, which I have 4 different colors of green inks here. I have eucalyptus, grass skirt, lime ricky, and then melon ice down at the very bottom. I also have a little bit of orange twist right off to the right hand side, and I will end up using a little bit of pixie dust, which is a nice purple color, to fill in some of my flowers. I'm using a water brush. This is just what I like to use. You can use a water and brush, but I like to just keep it nice and simple and use it all in one. These are the brushes from Arteza. I will leave a link down to them in the description box below. I'm also using Arteza watercolor paper. It's a nice thick, heavy paper. It's got a smooth side and a textured side. I stamped on the smooth side today. I'm just using different colors of green ink to come in and color each one of these cactuses. The reason that I heat embossed is because whenever I come in watercolor, I am super messy. I don't like to take a long time. Watercoloring, while I love the look of it, it's not my favorite thing to do. So I like to give myself a little bit of a well, which with that heat embossing, it pops up a little bit, it raises up. Has a nice edge to it, and it's going to hold all that color in water in place while it dries. So I can get pretty messy here, and I know it's going to remain where I put it. So I don't have to worry about bleeding or anything like that. I'm also a very impatient person. When I go and create, I don't have a whole lot of time. I like to get things done. So any place where I can save a little bit of time and not have to worry about colors bleeding together, I like to go ahead and take that extra step and do it. For each one of my cactuses, I am sticking to a certain color. So I use the eucalyptus on the larger cactus with the little flower on top. I use the grass skirt on the very tiny little cactus with the flower. I'm using the lime ricky on the cactus that has a bunch of different parts on it. And finally, I'm coming in with that melon ice right on the larger cactus without the flower. This is super, super quick watercoloring. I've only sped this up about 4 times, and it didn't take any time at all to get it done. Once I have all of my little cactuses colored in, it's time to color in all the flowers. So I'm using that orange twist on the very smallest cactus little flowers, but I wanted to switch up the color on the larger cactus little flower. So I decided to go with the purple. I'm using pixie dust, like I said. It's a nice bright purple. I love that color. And I'm going to fill in all the little flowers on the larger cactuses with that. Now each little flower also has a center. So I did go ahead and grab out a little bit of sauna ink. It's sauna ink, and I just added a very, very tiny bit of that yellow color right in the center of each little flower, and that finishes the background. It was so easy, but it was so much fun, and I love the way it turned out. Now I kept mine very clean and simple. If you wanted to kick this up a notch, you could also take a little bit of blue watercolor and just fill in the area around the cactuses, and that'll give you a nice kind of pop-up off the page with that. For my sentiment, you can use any of the little sayings or verses that are in the Blossom stamp set itself. They are gorgeous and they are perfect to go with this, but I wanted to use the Hello sentiments from Clair. One of my favorite things to do is to combine different stamp sets and just make them work for what I want them to work for. So I'm using that same VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink to go ahead and stamp Sending from Hello Sentiments right onto some white cardstock. I didn't know how big I wanted this, so I just stamped it on a scrap piece of white cardstock and then cut it down with my paper trimmer to save me a little bit of time. I'm going to do the same thing with the mat. Because I didn't have exact measurements on the sentiment, I just went ahead and added a little bit of double-sided adhesive on the back of that sentiment strip, and I just placed it on some black cardstock right in a corner. Then I can cut off the top and also the right-hand side to match the left and the bottom. That's just a very quick way to get my matting done and to keep it nice and kind of aligned and everything looking the same. I messed up on my sentiment. I went ahead and used that orange twist to stamp Hugs underneath Sending right on the sentiment strip. I didn't love the way that looked though. So I grabbed some orange cardstock, stamped Hugs with the VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink, and I'm just going to quickly trim that out with my scissors. Then I popped that up with some double-sided adhesive right over Sending where I messed up with the Hugs, and that covered it up. I like the way this looked a lot better. I kind of offset it a little bit, made it a little wonky. On the back of the sentiment, I'm going to apply some double-sided adhesive. I am using some foam tape that I get from Amazon. I also get my adhesive from Amazon. It's very similar to the score tape that I used beforehand, and then the foam tape is very similar to the 3M. It's just a lot cheaper, and I'm going to leave those links down in the description box below. I'm going to go ahead and pop up that sentiment right in the center of my panel. I wanted it nice and small so you wouldn't get a lot of coverage from the cactuses. I wanted those to really be the main focal point. Then the entire panel, I'm going to go ahead and pop onto an A2 top folding white card base that I made myself. Once I have that on there, that finishes off the outside of the card. I love the way this turned out, and I love that I was able to use one of the Color by Faith cards to make just a regular everyday card. I love the Color by Faith series, and it's great for Bible journaling. But whenever you look at those, you also want to be able to use them in your everyday card making. So just by pairing them with an everyday like sentiment stamp set like the Hello Sentiments, it works out really well. Then if you want to keep with the kind of religious theme of the Color by Faith series, you can stamp one of those verses or sayings on the inside of the card like I did here. So I went ahead and took the same VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink, stamped that saying from the Blossom stamp set right on the inside of the card. This is very large, so I let that sit for a minute, and I did not press down enough right in the top there. So a little trick, if that happens to you, I don't even try to line up these larger ones again. I would just screw up the whole thing. So I take just a dark black marker. I'm using a Memento dual tip marker. This is in the Tuxedo Black color, and I just fill in the areas where I messed up. Super duper simple. I like this marker because it has a brush tip on it, but if you don't have a brush tip marker like this, you can use a black pen. You can use just a regular fine tip marker just to get the color back in there. It might just take a few more strokes. Once I had the sentiment all taken care of, I used the little cactus stamp that I hadn't used yet, and I stamped that down on either side of the little sentiment with some eucalyptus ink, and that finished off the inside of the card. Very, very simple. There's a closer look at one final picture of the finished card. That is going to do it for me today. There are going to be links on the left side of your screen that you can click on. There are also some video links over there if you would like to see more from me. Don't forget to check out the description box for a lot more information. Thanks for watching and happy crafting.